Well, good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for your time and attention today, and welcome to the fourth episode of the Beware the Day podcast. My name is Ryan. I started this podcast to educate and inform and occasionally entertain. I hope you've been enjoying what we've been talking about. Of course, the theme for this month is generational wealth. So we've covered that in great detail. Today we're going to focus on the Great Migration and the golden age of black capitalism. Before I continue, I just want to thank Black El Paso Voice, and I encourage you to follow my podcast by going to Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Apple, iHeart, and Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And please subscribe and follow this. As I said earlier, this is the fourth episode. So those episodes are chronicled there, and you can catch up if you'd like. I also want to mention, in keeping with the theme of generational wealth, I have additional information I have a Facebook page, KRC Companies LLC, and this is what I do when I'm not talking to you. I only spend maybe a little over half an hour a week, but the rest of my week is spent boosting profitability and cash flow for business owners. You know, there's 28 million businesses in the United States, and at a combined net worth of $32 trillion. Obviously, I can't get to all of them. That's where you, my listening audience, come into the picture. If this is something that you'd like to pursue, I have some information there. I also offer affordable healthcare solutions, all in an effort to promote generational wealth. So please visit my Facebook page for more information. Now, just to quickly recap, last week we talked about Sherman's Orders number 15, we talked about the Freedmen's Bureau, and we talked about the Compromise of 1877, which led to the end of Reconstruction. So today we're going to talk about the Great Migration and the golden age of black capitalism. And I do want to reference that this material today is coming from The Color of Wealth. It's an excellent book that chronicles what was done in the realm of public policy, the obstacles that were placed in the paths of not just African Americans, but they always talk about Native Americans, Latinos, and other groups. So, of course, the focus for this podcast is black history and black culture. So we're going to focus on what was done to the freedmen by politicians and public policy. So let's talk about the Great Migration. Now, what were some of the conditions in the South that triggered the Great Migration? For example, the sharecropping system and racial violence. Now, unemployed black men could be arrested for vagrancy. And what, in this case, if you were arrested in the South, plantation owners would pay your fine, but then you had to pay them back. And how did freedmen pay back these plantation owners? Well, they went back to the plantations to work off that debt, which basically was slavery 2.0, for lack of a better word. So they were arrested, the plantation owners paid whatever fines to the court, and they said, hold on, you got to come work for me so that you can work off this debt. So what percentage of these families owned their own farms? Well, about 4% of the families in the South owned farms, 4% of freed families. However, by 1910, 14% of farm owners were African American, and they controlled about 15 million acres of farmland. So you had black tenant farmers who were sharecroppers. So by 1890, 90% of black tenant farmers were sharecroppers. So, unfortunately, there were unscrupulous planters who cheated sharecroppers, charging for tools and other necessities. They would push sharecroppers off the land just before the harvest, and they would break contracts between the planters and the sharecroppers. Now, there were those who resisted. These sharecroppers were often captured, punished, and threatened with death. Some were jailed, and of course, once they were incarcerated, they were eventually rented out to white landowners in the penitentiary chain gang system. So now you're seeing the emergence of the convict leasing program that was frequent throughout the South and other parts of the United States. And today we know it to be the prison, privately held prisons in this country, where you have inmates that work for, 3, 4, 5 cents an hour. It is what was happening at this time is a type and shadow of the private prison system that we have today. The Ku Klux Klan and other terrorist organizations killed African Americans with impunity. Between 1890 and 1960, there was an estimated 4,742 documented lynchings. And I say documented. So just think about all of those lynchings that went undocumented. Of course, the lynch mobs had the police and the courts as allies. These lynchings went unpunished. There was an anti-lynching bill that was brought before Congress in 1934, which was defeated. And if you fast forward to 2005, Congress approved an apology for lynching. Unfortunately, the two senators from Mississippi refused to sponsor the bill, and it was in the state of Mississippi where the majority of these lynchings took place. So, as a result of all of these conditions in the South, the sharecropping system, the convict leasing, and racial violence, approximately 1.5 million African Americans left the South between 1900 and 1930. And they migrated to the cities of the North, and they got decent paying jobs in auto plants and steel mills and other manufacturing industries in places like Detroit and Chicago and other northern cities. Union contracts provided health benefits, retirement plans, and job security, and a black middle class begins to emerge. Now, due to residential segregation, self-reliance became a necessity. Now, the Golden Age was from 1919 to 1929. More than 70,000 black-owned firms were up and operating. Black-owned barbershops, beauty parlors, laundries, restaurants, grocery stores, newspapers, automotive shops, funeral parlors, banks, and insurance companies. Speaking of black-owned banks, the number of black-owned banks grew from 4 to 51 between 1900 and 1914. And I'm wondering how many black-owned banks do we have in the United States today? That's something that we will definitely explore in a future podcast. So you're starting to see the emergence of the black middle class. Doctors, lawyers, and teachers, a lot of whom were educated at the historically black colleges and universities that were stood up during Reconstruction. Other black institutions, such as colleges, churches, hospitals, and social clubs, were founded during this period, and they began to grow exponentially. Popular vacation destinations like Martha's Vineyard and Sag Harbor, these were popular vacation destinations for the emerging black middle class. Now, unfortunately, black-owned firms were subject to economic and social upheaval. It goes without saying that European Americans did not patronize black-owned firms for obvious reasons. So if you wanted to start a business at this time period, getting financing was next to impossible unless it came from a black-owned bank. So to give you an idea in terms of dollars, about 9% of these black-owned firms grossed more than $25,000 annually. Of course, with black prosperity, there was the envy and competition from European Americans, and this usually led to violence against those who were prospering. So you had uh, these Americans who migrated from the South, who were trying to make their way here in the United States, pulling themselves up by their bootstraps and just simply minding their own business. And here comes the enemy because they're envious and they're afraid of competition. Therefore, this led to violence. Now, and of course, during this period, of course, where it was World War I, this opened up opportunities for employment. However, racial tensions increased as European American veterans returned to reclaim their jobs. The summer of 1919 was called Red Summer due to the race massacres in Detroit, Chicago, and other cities. Racial violence escalated through 1925. In 1923, European American vigilantes lynched more than 20 residents of Rosewood, Florida, and mobs burned the entire black neighborhood, homes, churches, meeting halls, and schools. And the most infamous of race massacres that took place during this period was, of course, the Tulsa Race Massacre of 1921. So, to just summarize, we spoke today about the Great Migration and the rise of the black middle class and the golden age of black capitalism. In spite of all the obstacles that we had to overcome in the early 20th century, we managed to migrate to the north, found good paying jobs, and to my surprise, this is as much of an education for me as it is for you. Quite a few black owned businesses thrived in the north during the Great Migration. We spoke about the violence that took place because of envy and just sheer racism. European Americans would burn down entire towns and neighborhoods during this period. But in spite of it all, we just continued to just move and thrive, and to this day, we continue to overcome these obstacles. So, next week, we're going to do a deep dive into the Great Depression, the New Deal, and its impact on African Americans. In my research, I was surprised to discover that some provisions of the Social Security Act and other laws that were passed during the Great Depression and the New Deal were written in such a way that quite a few African Americans were excluded from those benefits. So we'll talk more about that later on next week in episode number 5. So I hope you've enjoyed the material that was shared today. I want to thank Black El Paso Voice. Please support this medium through Black El Paso Voice. Make sure you tune into Suite 915 with Curtis and Fedora and Real Talk with Marcus McCoy. And I look forward to talking to you again next week. Again, thank you for your support. I say this every week. There's 5 million podcasts in the podcast universe with over 70 million subscribers. And I'm happy and I'm honored that you chose my podcast today. And we will see you next week. Take care.